Hours late.
Forgive me for losing track here, but we have a 2.5% increase from the previous year for all the other employees, and that's the difference in the
Okay.
585. I'm sorry, I apologize, I just lost the track for a moment.
Okay. And then, so then I'll buy that. Then the only other question again is the overtime, and that just seems excessive to me. I think it's excessive now, but I understand why it's excessive because we don't have the manpower.
Well, there's another factor there. The CBA dictates the terms of overtime, which in a business mode that didn't have that kind of requirement, you'd find other ways of dealing with supplementing with part-timers a lot quicker and everything else.
And the CBA also makes us pay from the top down. So the highest paid officer, who you see most often with the most money, takes all the overtime. If it's offered, it has to be offered from the top down, and you're very seldom going to find that person refusing overtime.
So what's the value then of part-time people?
If we have somebody that's on vacation, I can replace them with part-time people. If we have a pre-scheduled date like a holiday, I can put part-time people in.
Special events.
You can have a special event where we can put people in for part-time.
Unless the officer who's full-time wants the overtime.
No, you're only required to have two
No.
full-timers.
Right, right. And if a person is out for more than 30 days, then I can start replacing that person with part-time. But the trick there is that every one of those officers has that 990 an hour threshold. So we have to be very careful to manage our part-time so that we don't involve these people in IMRF. Because once they go to
Got
IMRF,
it.
they're stuck in IMRF.
Got all that. So if I'm thinking 18 months down the road, Chief, how many officers should you have at that point?
If we move past the hiring process, the training process and everything, 14 people altogether, that puts, it puts 3 in supervisor positions, myself, and then the rest of the staff on the road. And supervisors work.
What I was getting at is, do we need to be talking 16 instead of 14? And do we need to be looking at, October, starting to recruit for next year? Or
Well,
something like that?
once we post the list, once the list is published, we're able to draw down the list for 2 years. So once that cycle of hiring has taken place, and that's why I kind of stress being cautious about how long you allow advertising for, because if you don't, you're only going to get the people that responded. Now, we're going to advertise on the Blue Line, we'll advertise in local papers, and the last time we did that, the Blue Line got us the most people. And the important part of that is you want a higher number of people coming to start the process, so that as you start, weeding them out, you don't weed down to a list like we did. Because the last time we did our list, we weeded down to, by the time the list was complete, we were down to 5 people. And we hired 3. So the list that went, that list that expired in that 2-year period, there was only 2 people on it, and neither one of them were hired after that, because we were never in a position to do that. Now, the 2 people that have left by attrition through retirements, they weren't replaced, and that was the decision of the previous administration. Would I have liked to have kept the numbers? Absolutely.
Now, help us out here on this. There has in the past been a COPS grant.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen a COPS grant out for a long time, but the last COPS grant that I got awarded to us, we turned down. And once you turn down federal money, it's not very likely you'll get it again.
The COPS grant would basically be you hire 1 or 2 full-time officers.
1 full-time officer, 75-25, you can portion the 75% out any way you want to. Take 100% the first year and 50% the second and 25 the third, but the federal government requires you to keep that officer once they're hired. I haven't seen a COPS grant advertised in probably the last 3 years.
Okay.
And I do have in my email every day federal grants line. That's that I get the information on. If I see something that's appropriate, I always bring it forward.
I know you're not necessarily asking tonight for the approval to additional or whatever else, but this is setting its
For
own
information only.
And keep in mind, when we're talking about our balanced budget for the general fund, all the departments in the 01 fund apply to that overall balance. So
And if we'd like to keep going, just the rest of the brief explanations, there's not too many more to go. The next increase is the maintenance technician. There's a collective bargaining agreement where he has an increase in his pay. The next line down for me would be 525, which is replacing the office chairs. And we've replaced office chairs with, the cheap ones before. They last about a year. We wind up not getting our money's worth out of them. I'd like to be able to go to somebody who actually, builds them, delivers them, and we don't have to sit on the floor. And that's why we've asked for an increase there.
01-21-584, East County dispatching. Is that the, Daryl, do we know, does that correctly reflect the new IGA that we have with them? Or John, do you know?
The amount for us should go down, and we can probably decrease that range once we have a absolute final number. And we need our IGA signed with them in order to do that.
It's been signed,
Okay, then I'll check.
but I don't know if all the other towns have and everything else. But at most, it's gonna go down, what, just a couple $1,000s?
Yeah, 2,000 for the year.
So we're close.
Yes.
So, I mean, we might save $2,000 to $4,000, something like that.
It might be more than that, but I'd have to check to be certain.
Okay, can you find that out tomorrow?
I can't.
All right, Daryl, make sure you get that, so you can add that into our total adjustments. Thank you, sir. Any other questions for the police
Yes,
department?
653,
I'm sorry?
653
Tool and work equipment?
for the radars
That's what I was gonna ask
are
you.
all 6 completely obsolete.
Right now, we don't have a great deal of working radars. We're patching them together. And the contract price for the state of Illinois right now is right around $1,400 a unit. And
Now, is this
with,
for LiDAR or is this to stay with?
that's for a two-way radar.
Okay.
Actually, LiDAR is almost $1,900 a unit. And it's,
Would it be more efficient?
LiDAR is stationary only. The radar is moving and stationary, so it's more useful in the grand scheme of things. And, not to put a topper on it, but some of the radar units that are in the cars, I broke in the 80s.
Yeah, that would be good.
Those look good.
Not to put too fine a point on
No.
it. And our CF29 computers have to be upgraded from XP, and some of them need to be replaced. We found a tablet that's absolutely fantastic to replace them. The computers are generally about 5,000 a piece. The tablets are 2,100, and we have 2 on the street right now deployed. They seem like they're going to be working great with the new CAD, and it's a good solution for us to get away from them and go to that tablet.
So you get a better technology, it's about half the price?
Yes, yes.
And so I just have a question too, and this is like a cleanup thing, and there's under line 472 for police trustee, and I noticed, and I talked to Daryl about this a couple months ago too. I think we put the trustee under each committee that they used to sit under, and since we don't do that anymore, I'm wondering if we can put all of us
Sure.
under the same.
And there again, that was also addressed, but in the process of realigning the chart of accounts, we want to make it through based on the numbers everybody's comfortable with thus far. The goal would be to actually, it's still part of the general fund though. So it's, even though it's under a department, it still affects the general fund.
Right, this is just going to be a move from each individual department into the general fund up top where the 0100s are, so.
And just, I know we're still talking finance, but just to, Larry's okay for me to, that's fine, I just wanted to say this. I have had some reconsideration about my original desire to eliminate the committees per se, because I felt like they were not efficient, and I believe they weren't. But I am, and I do want to talk to each of the trustees at some point in the very near future about establishing what I will refer to as a liaison to a department, because that way it will keep you guys more engaged, but without the structure of the committee, whereas you'd had to deal with open meetings violation potentials of two people couldn't talk and all that sort of thing. So it's easier just to have one person dealing with a given department. So I want you guys more engaged. And I think the way to do that is to kind of re-implement that but do it on an individual basis, so there'd be a liaison to, say, the police department. So that would be the trustee that would be lobbying, if you will, on behalf of, and, you know, holding accountable to, let's say, the police department or whatever the case may be. So I am contemplating that, so whether it gets pulled out of that again, puts in the general area, or left in the individual department, either way, you guys are getting paid, so it's, but it all comes out of the general fund, so.
If I could ask on gasoline and oil, you're looking for a 25% increase there?
I'm sorry.
650, 655. Third from the bottom.
We budgeted last year for 40,000 and we're budgeting for 40 this year, as far as I can see.
Yeah, you're projected with, thus far, is only 31,000 approximately.
I'd suggest then we take it down.
Well, if we got 2 extra cars on the street.
They don't have to go as far.
Maybe that's them.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
We gotta cut something, I mean, we didn't spend 31 last
We
year.
did. We took $500 out of my luncheon budget. You guys don't see that, but I did. And
Can we take it from the
we took the
whole
base head cash altogether. That was 1,000 right off the top. And the best part is, Ms. Preston, I know you're looking for the big money. I'm happy to tell you that in line, and this actually reflects in a different spot on your budget, but in line 01222513, which is maintenance for the police building, we've given back $450,000.
I appreciate you giving that back to us. I noticed that already.
This is capital improvements that are.
I'd still like to take 5,000 out of this.
Okay,
I don't want to divide it
35,000?
so what do you want to drop that 5,000?
to 35.
Is that okay with everybody? Chief, or you think that's reasonable?
It's fine with me. I'm not in a position to argue.
Keep in mind, in 2012, they spent 46,000.
But that was under a different chief, and this esteemed chief.
If all the steam would stop, then, you know,
We don't stop our steams.
all right, as long as I don't have to see a policeman driving an electric vehicle.
And then again, the next subject along the same line would be on the next page, uniforms. You, obviously you had a $16,000 budget, you're asking for the same, but you've only spent 11,000.
Not everybody buys all the uniforms every year, but if everybody did buy everything they're allowed to buy, we would need to pay for it. And I recognize that, that's, not the best answer in the world, but the contract says they're owed $1,000 each.
Okay.
And if we don't do that, if
Gotcha.
we don't budget for it, then I think we're just.
So we leave it there, okay. That's a good explanation, thank you.
And if anybody cares to look at the motorized equipment new, we took money out of that line from the year before to bring it down to 55 in order to be able to meet the budget item, but that also prevented us from putting new equipment into the 2 cars. We wanted to transfer in old radars, old radios, and a few other things in, and so I simply asked for the money that we had from the previous year in order to get the new equipment in all the vehicles. Because once, anything in that line, if we buy the car, that's new bumper to bumper, including equipment up on top and everything. It's a complete vehicle rather than me saying, let me put more money in the budget here to be able to pull it out of there to put it into the new car. I don't think anybody here wants to see a new car in a different price tag. That vehicle has, here's all the things that went in it, here's the bottom line, we all know what it costs.
At what time, chief, do you determine that you need to replace one? Is there a mileage or?
We generally go by mileage. We did go a couple of years without replacing them, so we're kind of behind the curve. We had been replacing one per year every year. We skipped 3 years, and now we're at the point where we need to buy 2 cars again this year. Maybe next year we'll be in a position where we can do 1 car and not have to be so desperate to get another car in the fleet. But we're at some of the vehicles are up at over 100,000, 130,000 miles, and once you get to that, you start spending the real money on them, and then that's something we don't want to do. We'd rather, drive the things in good condition.
And I'd like to point out to the board that we have saved money on new vehicles by having the equipment installed in-house, correct?
Yes.
And that includes the body wrap and so forth. Do we do that?
No, that's outside.
The wrap is an outside, but everything in the way of equipment that goes into the vehicle is done in-house by our service tech. So all the, well, everything.
It's 9:30, we have 4 more pages to go.
Okay, I just want to ask real quick here. Daryl, this is a question for you. 0121932, impoundment refunds. I know we found a few things that are listed as expenses and such. Is that technically an expense in that? Is it truly an expense or is it?
Well, impoundment refunds, you'll have some expenses with that, but refunds typically should go up top in the revenue section.
It'd be like a negative revenue? I mean, I'm asking to correct,
Not a negative revenue, but it'd be a revenue, and then you'd have
you're
your.
actually taking away from the revenue you
Right,
generated.
right.
So it's not, is it truly an expense?
It depends on how you look at it. If you have a impoundment expense, and then you have something that's kind of a reimbursement, then you can either pull it out of that line item, which is the expense, or you can sit it up top and have it as a revenue.
So it's pulled out of the original revenue?
Right.
So if you got a refund of $5,000, your budget in here, and you bring in,
It's how you wanna show it.
that's fine. So either way, it doesn't,
No,
it's fine. It's easier to track it that way, so you know which ones are, it's fine. And then, Chief, you mentioned that your maintenance tech was part of the CBA.
Yeah, he's part of the other, not the police department CBA, but the village's CBA with the other workers.
But you're referring to the service tech, not the maintenance tech. I want to make sure we're talking about the same person. You have a maintenance tech that answers to Elise. I'm not talking
No,
about that person.
he's actually out of maintenance in his department. Even
Right.
though-
Right. So I just want to make sure, because I thought that person was only working part-time.
Yeah, he's not, that money for him does not come out of my department, he's just managed while he's there.
Understood. I just want to make sure because when you said maintenance tech, I thought that was actually his title.
No, so that's for,
What is his title?
Mechanical maintenance.
No, I'm not talking about him, I'm talking about the part-timer that goes through. All right, that's fine. I thought it was called maintenance tech, I'm
I
not.
call him janitor, maintenance man.
Yeah, that's fine. All right. Next. Anybody else on the police department for,
Yeah, just, I'm sure there's a good answer. Police department building maintenance, 4,211, 19,012, 31,013, and 420,000
yeah, the chief needed his own workout room and everything
is
else.
was this due to the construction work? Was this due to the construction work?
There's the mold and everything else.
Let's go back to, which line are we?
Very last item,
22,513.
513.
Actually, it's kind of weird.
Police department building maintenance.
Yeah, that's all the projects, and everything that was done over.
That was
Yes.
okay, the money we allocated
Yes, that was
in the budget for
yes.
the major work, $1 million, whatever it was.
Groundwork for the roof, for the, air
Kind of figured it, but I'm
conditioning.
thinking people look at this and they go, what? Okay, thank you.
And the 50,000 you're gonna use next year for what?
Well, we have vent fans that have to be replaced on the roof, those are gonna be a cost to us. We'd like to get some of the floor redone in the building, that's gonna be a cost to us. In general, we're gonna wind up with a few things, and we don't wanna, again, I don't wanna run into a situation where if somebody tells me that we need to replace 10 tiles and they break 10 more, that we, don't have money to cover those expenses. These are things that, through normal maintenance, of where when we moved our front office to the back of the building, we wore out a bunch of tile in the back of the building that needs repair and replacement. The vent fans for the bathrooms were not something that was scheduled for any replacement during the past project, and each one of them has gone out over the successive years. And literally since we started the project, more or less one at a time. And they're industrial sized for the building, so they're not exactly the cheapest thing in the world.
And our generator is working correctly over now.
Generator is working correctly. We got every major issue that we had corrected. The minor ones that are coming up are the ones that are going to be repainting the floor in the garage garage in the Sally Port, restriping in the Sally Port in the garage, the fans that are, vent fans up on top of the roof, our typical maintenance of plumbing issues that come in, which include the lockups have valves that are a couple $100 a piece that need to be replaced. And as we find this out, I usually give this information to Superintendent Griselle, and he makes a list of all of our deficits.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else for the police department? Now that he gave us back $450,000?
Okay.
I'm generous like that. Paid for my full-time people.
Actually, yeah.
It doesn't work that way, sir?
We'd like to go back to the 08 for that as well.
Oh,
Well, sorry, I'm not gonna let this go that easy.
Okay.
I go back over the last couple of years, we spent $4,200 in 2011, $19,000 in 2012, $31,013, and 420 because we had a big project. It just sounds to me like 50,000 is a number someone just threw out there without any specific plans, and we spent a lot of time arguing a while ago over a couple $1,000s.
Okay.
Maybe this is one where we can say, if you don't have a specific plan, we ought to think about maybe 30,000 instead of 50,000. That's still pretty generous. You can put a lot of tile in for that, particularly if DJ does it.
I'm not gonna say that.
I understand. Would you like me to give you a better number, say, for the fans, the tile, and the bells, and since we have time?
That would be nice.
I can absolutely do that.
Yeah, if we could do that, then we can revisit that number, otherwise,
Here's a question I have for you. Based on his, so we can move it along with Daryl with the general numbers. Chief, let's say the cost of those items specifically, the known items, ends up coming in at, say, $20,000 specifically. Do you want to allow for, because those are defined, do you want to allow an additional 5,000 beyond whatever the state is?
only 10% is a good number. I guess, where are we at right now on the totals, Daryl?
Hey, you lost track of our ups and downs?
Yeah, I was at negative 34.
Yeah, I think we got 20 here we can take back, folks.
You want to take it back to the,
And let's start with 30, and give us $30,000 worth of what you plan on doing. And I completely agree with the contingency, but I'd like to see a little more detail. And I think 50 is just a number because we had 500 we spent this year. Let's take 10% and slide it in.
I totally understand that.
I want to know budgeting
So
for
you
all
want
this
to,
stuff.
so what are you asking for? You want to drop it to 25,000 then?
30.
30 is the budgeted amount?
I'd like to drop it to 30, and if he comes back with something more, fine, but I'm not gonna hold your chief to 30. I mean, I'm not gonna worry about it at this point, because I know you'll have to come back and ask for it later anyway, but
Right.
that gives us a part of what we're looking for.
So we're
Is
saving.
that okay with the rest of the trustees?
Yes. So we're saving another 20? Chief, I will say this, if, let us know if there's a specifically identified amount beyond that. Sure. So we can take that into consideration. Okay, can we go on to 0122? Page 6.
Three more pages to go.
12, 15, 20.
No, 3 more.
So let's start with 512, $25,000 for a village,
All building maintenance.
all maintenance, maybe DJ or
Sure.
Ruben or something.
DJ, would you like to?
512.
I'm sorry.
Building, village hall building.
0122, 512, page 6. And 11, it was 4,700, and 12, it was 12 and a half, 13, it was 18, almost 19. Thus far in, well, it's budgeted 22, we've actually spent 27 thus far. Theoretically projected at 29, it's set to 50. So,
I can address the increase in cost on this.
Sure.
We've noticed
throughout the many years that there has been a need for the heat and the AC in the building to be renovated. It's either too hot or too cold in certain areas. We've already gotten multiple estimates for the system that we have going on here. And the estimates are coming in right around $25,000 to replace the heat and the AC. So that number is reflected in the actual raise of the 50. We budgeted $22,000 in 2014, so I'm adding in the 25 to that. And since that time, when we had our front door replaced, as you remember, some of the tile along the foyer has started cracking and falling apart. The tile in the hallway here is cracked and falling apart, and we threw in the extra money just in case we want with the carpet replacements or redoing any of the rooms that you had shown an interest in to provide additional staffing locations for them. So that's why there's an additional increase in it.
Good enough.
And I'm just gonna go back to 459, if you don't mind, it's the lovely overtime again. And if you'll notice too, we only budgeted $1,000 last year in 14, and we've already gone over that by 900%. So the new budget is projected at $10,000. So I think that's fair, just so we don't have the overtime, but I would rather see, since we're gonna be getting new staff, to take the overtime budget way down, you know, to maybe 5,000.
Now, just to clarify, this is not clerical staff for the buildings, this is public works staff.
That's, you know, and I assume it was more like for over the winter, correct?
Actually, it could be related to anything that has to do with building and grounds, parks, and events. This line went up when we had to host and fund our internal parks events that we had going on, from the Kids' Day to the Fall Fest, the additional staffing, all that overtime to do any of that stuff for any of that infrastructure work came out of 01/22 459. So anytime anybody worked overtime for any kind of park event, whether it was a park rental fee, whether it was anything, it could have been a full-timer, it could have been a part-timer, it doesn't matter, it's a one overtime line item, it came out of that line item.
And Daryl, help me out on this. There's also a potential offset revenue for, like if there's a personnel that's overseeing the usage of the park building and things like that. And so there's an offset to that as well, in theory.
We'll get some revenue.
So it's not and that's part of what when we were identifying rates for usage of facilities and all that, these are some of the things that we were trying to take into account back when we were defining the rates. Was it about a year ago? Was it about a year ago, Bill?
I'm sorry, what?
Was that about a year ago or a year and a half ago or something like that when we were, or no, just under a year ago, I'm sorry.
That's something else I had, BJ was saying, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
When you say the infrastructures of the Kids' Days and the Fall Fest and you know, Halloween happenings, they're getting paid to set up. The employees that were there for those events, were they being paid while they were there?
Correct.
Okay, so it wasn't just volunteering their time?
No,
We have had some that did volunteer.
we did have
We had
some,
some, okay.
but you can't have them volunteer if the duties are related to their normal duties
Correct.
as being employed. Like if my public works guys decided they wanted to collect tickets, that's not part of their everyday job description. They could collect tickets, but once you start doing infrastructure repairs, that's part of their normal job duties. They cannot per collective bargaining agreement.
So it could be possible that the gentlemen that were sitting by the John Deere's were getting paid?
Sitting, sure. It all just
Fair enough.
depends, whatever.
Fair enough. Thanks.
So, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, and
Later.
Would there also be, David, and I know it's a permanent installation, the new water line and the electrical that went in for,
That was part of it, most of that was absorbed during normal business hours, so it would have been over the overtime, it would have been under the maintenance man line item, and that's why you see the increase under that one.
Yeah, I believe that was-
The increased manpower and internal repairs to the park activities.
Yeah, that was budgeted in
It
too.
was budgeted
Yeah.
in, and it was given an approval to spend extra with the infrastructure repairs, also came with man-hour repairs to do that during normal business hours. That's why going to 452, I've increased the manpower, internal repairs, and park activities. Last year, we projected 72,000. We don't anticipate the same amount of infrastructure repairs, although after discussing future park plan repairs of the park, it's anticipated that internal staffing is going to be needed to improve the normal grounds, the building and grounds infrastructure.
So going back to the overtime, all I'm saying is maybe this is something that I know you've asked for 10,000, but I think in all reality that it could, especially if we're talking about, I don't think we'll have, hopefully not as bad of a winter as we did this year, and utilizing full-time people or however, or keeping them within their hours rather than going that extra mile and budgeting 10,000 for overtime. If we have 5,000 for overtime, that's what we do, right?
This is not so much weather related though.
Not necessarily.
Not in this particular, he's got other department breakdowns that would reflect that though,
That's
trustee
right.
Gonzalez. This is more buildings and grounds related.
I think one of the questions has to be, we're doing a lot more things on weekends now. We have, instead of one event a year, we've had 4 this year, I believe. And we have to have staff there from the maintenance department one way or the other. I know this summer my company is going to have a picnic over here at the Fireman's Park, and somebody will have to be there while we're there, according to the code, so that has to be paid for. Now, there is a revenue offset, we're paying for that.
Right.
So that is the point to remember, Trustee Gonzalez, is even though you have the overtime, that is, a lot of that is being offset by revenue. Now, the other option would be letting them hire extra people and reschedule the hours so that the people who work on Saturday and Sunday are not on overtime. Maybe they were off Monday or Tuesday, something like that.
Or identify part-timers that would be suitable in that department as well for some of those things.
Possibly. I think that's where we have to get creative, and I would agree with you on that. We have to be creative on how we spend the money, but one way or the other, we are having more and more activities on weekends, which means we're going to have paid staff there. And that expense is going to go up. There should be offsetting revenue for a lot of that, however.
But I do want to bring to note 2 things. One is, again, Darrell, like we've talked about in the past, we're correcting where things have not been categorized well. Superintendent Curzel has done a phenomenal job of when he encounters a activity in his department, or departments, if you will, with all the areas of responsibility he has, he's done a phenomenal job of making sure that the cost of an employee goes to the particular account code that it needs to. That has not been done in the past, but I want you to take note of under his watch, you can see that it's, I think it's a positive reflection on him that in 2011, you didn't see that item tagged specifically to that department. It was just put out there in a general area, not detailed out. In 2012, you saw where he started making changes in that area. 13, you actually see the overtime was 7,400. In 14, it was 8,300. So you see, there's a trend there. It's not a trend for him to push for overtime, but there's a trend that he's actually documenting correctly the appropriate department chart of accounts that should be reflected on an area of services being provided. So even if you look at the previous administration, there was still, I mean, you're only $800-900 difference from the previous year in overtime. Now, can we do a better job of getting more part-timers and scheduling accordingly and all that sort of thing? I think we can probably do the best we can. But it's not always easy to find part-timers that want to work weekends that are self-supervised.
That is programmed into this to utilize more part-timers so that we don't have to pass the full-time staff. This number was inflated due to the fact of the board decided to take on Fall Fest this year, and we had to have our expert staff, electrician, a time and a half on site to make sure that our new infrastructure was going to work properly. The water department was also in case we had water issues feeding the new vendors. There was just a heightened need to make sure that some of the more experienced people with the infrastructure and what was going on were there to make sure that the first year was kicked off correctly.
To that point, if I may, Trustee Gonzalez, I believe, has a good point, and that we potentially could decrease the overtime there. You can't decrease it to the year 2011 because it wasn't even being tracked efficiently then. But Superintendent Crizel, what do you think would be a reasonable, if we were to adjust that down, what do you think would be a reasonable?
Currently, sir, we're at 8,300 spent for the year.
But that included a lot of what you're talking about, your expert staff being available over the weekend, and so we're not gonna have that again per se, because a lot of that will be established.
You know, as Chief Sitcar alluded to, I always like to err on the side of caution because I don't know how much more the village is gonna take events, how much things are gonna change. The year before, we were at 75, this year, right around 85. If we kept it around there, I would be okay, but I just always try to err on the side of caution in case we have a new village event that we take on. I know we're taking on, you don't know how to plan for them. We're doing a special church thing this Thursday after hours. You know, I know my time doesn't count in the overtime line item after hours, but I spend a lot of my time here personally setting these things up and doing these things. It sure would be nice to have a part-timer or somebody else doing those things for me. It's just hard for me to anticipate as the village keeps growing. The revenue will offset when we rent the park building now that it's in place. It wasn't in place before.
Sure.
You know, I can err on the side of caution. I can do my best to budget it, as I always do. Just because I set the budget at 10,000 doesn't mean I'm going to spend the 10,000. It's just error on the side of caution to make sure that if in the event somebody decides they want to run for a cause that they need, we're able to cover it in our parks and in our buildings.
If I could interject, Mr. Mayor, as well, we have seen an increase in rental, in the usage of our park building. And now word is getting out, and it's actually moved out into outside of Monee. We've got folks from Matson and Creek and Piatone and Mantino that have also requested usage. And so I anticipate that because they've got a great deal here in Monee and what we have to offer at our building, word is getting out, and we're going to see an increase.
But would that reflect on overtime, or would that just be ideally, I mean, we can't predict if we're going to have part-timers available, because if they're working a full shift of doing
Because
everything
now
else.
we're seeing it at different hours, different days. You know, usually it was the weekend, but now we're seeing evenings as well. And some of these usages are by organizations that we are in partnership with, so there's not always either a fee or staff. We've got to find staff to help us to make sure we've got the building open.
Okay. What, Trustee Hearn, you're about to say something?
I just see the trajectory in the budget here is we're spending more and more on overtime, which I'm fine with. And as we've alluded to, or mentioned rather, that we're doing more in the village. I think we want to continue that. I think we want to do more, offer more events and so forth for our residents. So I don't see that we need to change that 10,000. I think it's very a reasonable amount.
As a matter of fact, the overtime is 7.4% of his labor budget, compared to 11.5% for the police department and similar percent for the others. I think actually the facilities is probably doing a great job on overtime compared to the other areas. I would agree. I don't think we need to cut it down. I do think we might want to note that, again, they generate revenue when they're working out there on the park, because we are gathering revenue for that. The events that we have on weekends that they're here, we're getting revenue for. So there definitely is an offset here. Not that there's not one in the police department, I don't mean that, Chief. But I think there's a definite here. We might be able to do better with some more part-time help, but then you have to pay fringes and everything else. If they're only doing 7% overtime, I can't do that where I work right now. 7% is pretty hard to do, so that's actually a commendable job.
and again, he's asking for this to be in his budget, doesn't mean he's necessarily going to spend it. You know, in all reality, he might spend $10,000 on one part-timer that he can count on to manage some of those things and eliminate some of the overtime for his other personnel. But it needs to be allocated to labor of some sort, because we're gonna see that trend increase, as trustee Horn indicated. So,
I did adjust, just so that trustees, you are aware, in the 453 part-time public works line item, I did adjust to try to use more part-time people in those events than full-timers or overtime. So I am going to be very cognizant of that, keep that overtime down, and hope that I'll be able to staff it with more part-time personnel experience to be able to work events and do things like that.
next item.
Okay, then I guess the only question is then we might be able to get some of that back then on line item 517 then. And it looks like the detention retention pond maintenance, we never even had it until 14 and budgeted for $30,000 and only spent $2,940. So keeping it at 30,000 seems a little bit excessive.
And can I clarify, is that in a line of an account numbers again, Daryl, DJ, on that? Whereas we weren't doing a lot with pond maintenance, but I remember, was it 2 years ago, I believe it was, where we actually implemented over by Mr. Boswell's property on Park Lane, where somebody decided to plant lily pads in the pond and it overtook the whole thing and we had to,
Sure.
go ahead.
Trustee Gonzalez, to answer that question, you're correct. In the past, there wasn't a lot of money spent on detention ponds. I've already isolated a few areas of concerns with retention pond areas that they are going to need maintenance done to them. We own all those retention ponds right now, and they're in a distressed state, to say the least, right now. We've been controlling algae with grass carp. If you recall, or anybody recalls, the last couple of years I've been going on the weekends to get grass carp to try to control algae. There was one holiday weekend that I was in McCorkle Pond all day, every day, with a generator running, trying to pump down where somebody put a bucket in the outflow of the pond, probably 10 years prior, to get better fishing back there. And that resident moved away, and it eroded the banks about 5 feet in McCorkle's Pond. And if you go back there and you take a look at it, there is a significant drop-off where fences are starting to become an issue along the back there, because in one of the higher water level, because they liked it, and because they did that, it opened up a problem. The pond, Park Lane Pond, which we call Walker's Grove Pond, had a significant issue with beavers and wildlife damming that up, and there's significant erosion repairs to the very southeast corner, that have to be worked on. Part of the detention pond maintenance that you trustees haven't seen yet, that you're going to get a presentation about, is Eagle Fair Detention Pond. I've been working with engineers and with ComEd. We pump stormwater in Eagle Fair. It's a reoccurring cost that we never get back, because we don't charge for detention pond pumping. And to have a lift station for stormwater and not use gravity as its source, the detention pond pump that was left, the condition of Eagle Fair Estates and what was left in the stormwater detention for that area has made the ComEd crossing to the very south of Eagle Fair. It's eroded the pipe, and we recirculate the water now, so I have to manually turn the pump off or on, because the water will drain and fall. It will be pumped out, and it will go right back into the storm drain and come right back into the detention pond and pump and recirculate again. This went on for my tenure of taking over, to have the responsibility of it so much that it actually burned out one of the pumps. So we're now on one pump right now in that detention pond, and I have to manually turn it off and on during storm events to try to help get rid of that water. And that's why if anybody's noticed at Eagle Fair, a pond, every once in a great while, it takes twice as long for that water to pump out because most of the inflow comes back in. So although we have never done anything with it, I can't say anything ill will to the past. I'm just trying to project forward. We will spend it and then some. I'm just trying to set my plan up to be able to fix all these ponds, and hopefully, we've talked with engineers about possibly getting grants. They're far and few between to be able to restore some of these ponds. And with the prevailing wage on having contractors come out and rip wrap ponds and fix and build, because that's something above my crew, it's gonna cost the village. So I'm planning to get that stuff worked on and get it taken care of. And you'll see those presentations throughout the months as we move forward with those. Again, it was always projected, it was never spent, it was never used, but we know the condition of our ponds. There's problems.
So you believe 30,000 is a reasonable estimate, high, medium, low?
Being the first time that we're doing this, with the plan that's already gotten in place for some of the engineering and the stormwater detention, that number was plugged in. That will probably cover the repair to Eagle Fair this year, and that's my main problem.
Okay.
That will have to go out to bid and get fixed.
I have to excuse myself. I have to go home with my kids, so.
I understand.
But for moving down the line there, Superintendent Griselle, I'd like to talk about the sidewalk repair for a moment. The numbers look good. They look like something's happening there. Would that have to do with mud jacking? Is that making it cheaper? Are we keeping up with the sidewalks?
Well, Trustee Pop, yes, we have been keeping up with the sidewalks. Mud jacking has saved tremendously in realigning the sidewalks. The problem I'm running into now is there are some sidewalks out there that cannot be mud jacked.
Correct.
So there's complete stretches. Still working off the list from many years ago, to where we're boots to the pavement, making sure and checking and marking and counting squares and contracting out the work. There's a lot of ADA compliant corners in the old part of town that haven't been done, as well as the cracks. We'll be having to replace sidewalk this year where mud jacking won't be used. Yeah, we did it in July last year to take advantage of the downtime with the mud jacker, and.
So you're anticipating using close to 20,000?
This year, yes. I saved it out of this budget, fiscal, not spending it, because complete sidewalk sections that need to be replaced are going to get replaced during this fiscal budget. So save the money, fix the trip hazards in a lot of the subdivisions, and this year I'm going to try to focus on ADA compliant corners and sidewalks that are cracked above and beyond repair.
Okay.
So that we show that trend, so, God forbid anybody falls or gets hurt, we're taking care of the more serious ones in public property and right away.
Didn't we get some grants for that, Bobby?
We've got a grant for the Safe Route to School sidewalk. That's a different line item for this. And that was an IDAC, right?
Next item. Anybody got a question on anything else on that page?
Not to rub salt in anybody's food here, but I won't discuss the gator tonight, but we're gonna have a discussion, we'll leave it in the budget for right now.
Okay.
That is just for the maintenance of these, but in case I have a failure.
Okay.
Most I've had so far, not done with.
Anything else on this? Anything else on this page, or can we go to the next? Page 7's good. Page 8.
Julie expense, can you address that?
I may take that.
Yeah, go ahead, that's fine.
In the chart of accounts, the village is part of the Julie network, which is the one-call dig source, and we have never tracked the man hours and the time and the materials spent to perform locates within the village, with the village-owned utilities. That is water, that is sanitary, and where we own them, that is the street lighting. Part of my trying to track my man labor hours and the true cost of the expenditures for that, the building department was in conferring with Daryl in finance, the building department is the one that, it is the source for generating the call ticket. A builder, construction, homeowner, whoever in the municipality will call because they're getting some kind of work done that requires my men to go out and to use spray paint, to use Julie fags, to use locating equipment to locate our utilities. And in the past, those man hours were hidden either under road and bridge, under water, under some other fund, and it was hard to track the time that it takes the man out on the job without keeping it in a separate count. So, in conferring with Daryl, because recently I've acquired the building department, I feel that to get a true number of what it costs the building department to run when a contractor or a homeowner or whatever's happening, as simple as a tree planting, a Julie has to be called, a ticket has to be done, and I have to dispatch my guy within 48 hours for a normal dig or 2 hours for an emergency dig to go out there and to locate our equipment. The current locator that we have right now is in disarray. When I created the mechanical maintenance department, I started fixing this thing multiple times, and it's outdated and it's falling apart, and we have a hard time picking up utilities, so it takes my guy a little longer. He's getting pretty good. We have some good maps and some good documentation, but the Julie guidelines say that you have to be within a certain foot, certain inches, to be responsible for the hit. So if you don't get that utility located perfect and they hit it, and you are wrong on your marks, you are responsible for the repairs to that, which is going to bring the infrastructure costs of the water up, or the sanitary up, or the electric repair up. So now we are creating these line items to be able to supply that department, that part of the department, all the resources they need for the locating equipment, for the Julie flags, for the spray paint, and the man hours to be able to perform those duties.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Building, part of the engineering expense came from the original one, right? Correct. Yes, so we know that one. And then the building department manager was the previous one, budgeted, and you took off clerical assistant, so that makes sense to me, what you're doing, on a cost more. That's fine. Get some help in it for you. I'm good with page 8.
Okay, next page. Anybody else on page 8? You good? All right. Page 13. That's what I do with my kids at night, I'm sorry.
Sponsor fees.
Page 9, it's part.
Sponsor fees or what? Help me out.
Revenue though.
Yeah, yes, these are, because like we have sponsor fees for Kids Day, Fall Fest.
Oh, that's revenue, never mind, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we are not sponsoring necessarily anything else, it's the revenue potentially for parks programs, I guess is where this would be at.
Okay, Drew, where we at?
Sorry, well, we're going to take to the next page?
No, on O1, we agreed to stop there, but you get,
The general fund?
drum roll, please.
right, let me, can we
Minus
do page 10?
14.
Can we do page 10 real quick?
Let's finish, wait, we're not done with those. Let's get general fund first.
I thought we were, I thought you just
No,
said
he's asking for a number.
What did he say?
Oh, you're
Minus
talking-
14.
Minus 14, okay, so the next meeting, we have to pull 14 out. Or we can do it tonight, one or the other.
Move to adjourn.
Real quick, I just want to address something here. When you're looking at item, page 10, item number, second line on page 10.
Vehicle figures?
Yes, sir. I just want to make sure everybody's aware of one of the things we've run into on that. Daryl, go ahead.
With your 2 year. Yeah, it was a 2-year sticker. And the thing that happens here is you've collected cash, which may or may not have been spent in the current year. However, on a revenue side, you're going to represent it as revenue for the upcoming fiscal year. So even though you're not going to collect cash, it's going to look like you have, because when you get revenue for instance, the 2-year sticker, technically you're supposed to allocate 1/12 of that revenue for the following year. Say, for instance, we collected 170,000. We had to split that in half. I'm sorry, 126,000 was collected. We had to split that in half between the 2 years. And so in fiscal year 14, we're going to place that 63 in deferred revenue, and then each month we have to allocate a percentage, 1/12 of that amount, based on the upcoming year. So it's revenue for this year, but it's not cash. And we need to kind of be careful of that, to understand that we've collected the cash already, but the revenue will be reflected in the upcoming year.
And then, this is the one that we were off because of bond interest as well, I believe, or is that the?
Oh, yeah. Last budget period, there was an amount budgeted for what seems to be a bond issue, in which we...
This one's real dark on your black and white.
Correct, and I apologize for that, it was in color before.
Fifth line down, right under miscellaneous income. So,
Debt proceeds?
Debt proceeds, yes. And it looks like 1.52 was budgeted for bond proceeds, which we did not get in that
because that was
fiscal year
never
14.
implemented.
Right. So that's, I guess, something that needs to be addressed going forward for fiscal year 15. I just used the number from fiscal year 14 and put it here, but I highlighted so that you all be aware that, that it's probably a decision that needs to be made on bond issue.
Mr. Mayor,
Sir,
it's 10:15. My brain quit functioning 15 minutes ago. Some would say sooner than that, but that's the debate. I would like to recommend that even though we're not going to pass the budget at the next meeting, we go ahead and plan on meeting at 5:30 as we previously had agreed to, so that we can spend the first hour working on the budget.
first
The next
half hour.
meeting. First hour.
Half hour.
If we meet at 5:30, the regular meeting does start at 6.
There's a 6 o'clock meeting also scheduled to discuss water specifically for public comment.
Well, okay.
Doesn't mean you can't push the finance, make it run longer, that's fine. We can't start the next meeting until at least that time. Doesn't mean we can't make it, push it back further if we need to, correct?
Okay, so we would want to, I guess I'm asking the trustees, do we want to have another special meeting or another?
I would think that if you're ready to do one in another week, you do one in another week.
Next Wednesday?
Okay, that'll give you guys some time to digest the water-related issues.
We need a
And
motion?
I'll entertain a motion to have, not that we really need it, but for a special meeting a week from tonight. Do you want to start it earlier so we don't end up so late?
I actually, my son is graduating, if there's a requirement that the parents attend May 7th, the meeting, that,
Okay.
That next Wednesday, Heidi?
yeah.
Next Thursday?
Or Tuesday?
Tuesday, you got Superintendent Griselle and myself both,
What about next Thursday?
well, how about Monday?
Well, and I'll check and make sure if there's not another offering, but I know next Wednesday is one of them, so I'll see if I can go at another time.
That's fine, if you can do that, and
But if
then we don't actually have, as long as we have a general consensus that Wednesday might be okay, if trustee Gonzalez is okay with it. What we'll do is we'll tentatively set it for Wednesday, we don't have to actually have a motion for that specifically, as long as everybody, we get the agenda out in time. Sir?
I'm looking at the calendar, and it looks like there's a police commission meeting scheduled for the first Wednesday of the 7th, 6:30 to 8.
There is. Do we know, will they have anything to discuss at that next meeting?
Probably, I haven't seen their agenda, but probably the ad that's got to go in
Do they meet here?
They do,
Can they meet in a small room?
as long as it was publicly accessible.
So,
So they could, but the doors would have to stay open.
that would be interesting.
Hey, there's
Well, I'm available next Monday or Wednesday, either one.
It's typically only 3 or 4, 5, whatever it depends.
Okay. So don't hold up on the count of me, I'll catch up.
What time do we want to do the Wednesday? We do Wednesday.
It's not a big crowd, sorry.
Mr. Mayor, what time Wednesday then if we meet? 6?
Do you want to meet earlier? You want to meet at 5:30 or? I don't.
30's pushing, but 6 I could.
6? Sure. And just to confirm, Larry, if the police commission needs to meet and they can use a conference room door, as long as that door or the office is left open so that there's publicly open door.
Public access.
We'll have to set up a separate recorder for them. But that's not a problem. Okay.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Remember, we were supposed to go into executive session tonight to talk about that
Couple things.
personal matter. If we just, I don't want to go tonight, obviously, if we could just bring it up at the next board meeting.
Or the special meeting.
Special meeting, I'm sorry. I do need a response to get back to the attorney for
Do we want to meet briefly just to,
Can we do that in 10 minutes, you think?
5.
5?
okay, so I'll entertain a motion to go to executive session.
So moved. Second.
And we'll just eliminate this one item. Pertaining matters of labor litigation.
Do you need a roll call?
Yeah, roll call please.
Trustee Holston?
Yes.
Horn?
Yes.
Pop?
Yes.
Racer?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
What was the question?
Just for the public's concern, I don't believe we'll be making any decisions that'll require follow-up action. So we'll adjourn probably right after we come out.